My name is Homa Khairulapur. I am a member of Board of Directors of CSBC and a long-time volunteer of CSBC. So in this task here right now, I'm putting my volunteer task to welcome you all to CSBC 2025 and this amazing symposium on research infrastructure, which is a very, very important and very timely topic. And also give you a very, very brief housekeeping notes. So we start with a land acknowledgement, and we acknowledge that Canadian Science Policy Conference is taking place on the unceded and unsurrounded territory of Anishinaabe, Algonquin nations, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. Respect our traditional hosts and thank them for allowing us to operate on this land. A few housekeeping notes, and there is a QR code on each table because CSBC provides simultaneous translation and closed caption for all panels in both French and English. Please scan the QR code on your table, and you can use the app to use that translation. If you have not downloaded the CSBC app yet, please do so. CSBC 2025 app is available on both App Stores and Google Play, and it's definitely give you notification, and you can actually mark your favorite panel to go. If you're using social media, and we highly encourage you to use hashtag CSBC 2025 and make sure you tag CSBC as well. And finally, so after each session and panel, it's going to be a pops-up survey on the app, which is very important for CSBC team to make sure we have all the improvement needed. It's a couple of questions, really very, very short questions. So please make sure that you give us your feedback and to improve the conference next year. So enjoy the panel, and thank you for being here. And without further ado, so I'm going to pass the mic to my dear friend and colleague, Janet King.
Thanks, Homa. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's symposium. I think it's going to be quite a remarkable one. My name is Janet King, and I have the privilege of providing a few introductory remarks for this symposium. In their wisdom, the CSBC recognized a key interest and focused on Canada's research infrastructure in the overall panel submissions and suggested that the three we're participating in this morning we brought together as a symposium. The three panel proponents welcomed this and collaborated on an overarching theme, which is expressed in the symposium's title, Major Research Infrastructure, Engines for Collaboration, Innovation, and National Resilience. We have three remarkable panels coming up that will focus on interconnected perspectives on this theme. National research infrastructures as critical to addressing the needs of Canada's North, how global large-scale infrastructure can create highly impactful ecosystems, and how Canada could better leverage its assets in this regard, and considering how Canada could transform a fragmented research infrastructure ecosystem for stronger strategic purposes. Collectively, these three panels will outline a vision for a stronger, more competitive and resilient research infrastructure ecosystem in Canada. I'm currently chairing the Canadian Council of Academies expert panel on its current assessment, how can Canada optimize its national scale research infrastructure, encompassing large-scale facilities, digital platforms, and collaborative networks to effectively support current and future needs, an assessment requested by ISED. So I personally will be listening quite closely this morning. And we'd like to hear your views on this topic. This symposium will close with an interactive session to solicit your perspectives on barriers and opportunities to optimizing the benefits of Canada's national research infrastructure. So I look forward to you participating and offering your views in that regard. So that's the introduction, and I can hand it over to the first panel. I think David. Who do I, not? Okay. First panel. I invite you to the stadium, to the stand.
Good morning. Should I sit here or should it be here? Let's try here first, and then if it's more comfortable to be with the table, I'll just move over there. So good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Engel. I work with the Tongaat Fish Wildlife Plant Secretariat in Nunavut, Labrador. And it's my pleasure to moderate this panel today and start this conference with an incredible group of people to discuss the national research infrastructures. So let's dive right in. We don't have much time and we have a lot to talk about. So we will start with a round of introduction from each of the panelists with your name, your organization, where your organization stands within the national research infrastructures, and what's the role of your organization in the Arctic currently. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bernard Vigneault. I'm here to represent Fisheries and Ocean Canada, but full disclosure, and you'll probably see that from some of my remarks later on, I've also been working in the Arctic, both at Environment and Climate Change Canada and also Natural Resources Canada. We're asked, how do we interface with the national research infrastructure? I would say Fisheries and Ocean, like other federal department, has multiple roles, but primarily we're not the main funder of the infrastructure, but we're mainly a collaborator and a user. We benefit from the results. Through in-kind, through some of our activity, we contribute to the funding, but I would categorize more as a collaborator and user of the infrastructure. Our Fisheries and Ocean Canada roles in the Arctic is very significant, but I'll start by describing how we do it, because that's a major change that the government of Canada have done in terms of reconciliation. So in 2021, we create a specific Arctic region within Fisheries and Ocean Canada. The intent was to encompass all the Inuit Nunangat territory and have that new region mean for us to meaningfully engage with the communities in terms of co-development and co-management in the Arctic, which is fundamental for the work we do, in particular for the science. And speaking of which, we do monitoring, we do research, and we do science advice on projects that have been co-developed with our co-management partner and the communities, in support of a number of files under the Fisheries and Ocean responsibility in the Arctic, primarily managing fisheries resource, obviously, but also marine conservation area, and helping to support to the science about climate change, and particular climate change adaptation. So really pleased to be here this morning to discuss with the colleagues the Fisheries and Ocean roles in research in the Arctic.
Thank you.
All right, so my name is Benoit Pirenne. I'm with Ocean Networks Canada, an organization that's meant to observe the ocean in particular, as its name indicates, and we do that all around the country. My role at ONC right now is the Chief Innovation and Technology Officer, and I'm here essentially to represent and substitute to my President and CEO who could not be here today. What we do, as I said, is to observe the ocean, and we typically do that with cabled systems that provide the ability to have power all the way to the seabed, even far away from shore, to instruments that then measure all the parameters that we can measure about the ocean, that in support of the multiple disciplines that can study the ocean, from physical chemical and biological parameters. All of that, of course, is information that's produced, and it can be benefiting organizations like DFO, for example, an organization that actually is co-funding us together with the Canada Foundation for Innovation. When it comes to the Arctic, we have observation systems in the Arctic since quite a few years already, one of which is, of course, delivering data 24/7, 300 by 365. And we also have, together with a number of Inuit groups in the north, what we would call citizen science applications, whereby community members go and observe the ocean using devices that we procure them, and then the data that is collected then becomes quality controlled and made available again to the general public, or not if the communities have decided that they wanted to keep the data to themselves. But we'll talk about that among the questions that will come later during the panel session. I'll just pass it on to Philippe.
Merci Benoît. Bonjour tout le monde, mon nom est Philippe Archambault, je suis professeur en océanographie à l'Université Laval, and I'm also the scientific director of ArcticNet. For the people who don't know who is ArcticNet, ArcticNet is a non-profit organization which has been founded in 2003, so more than 20 years ago. The aim of ArcticNet is really to advance our knowledge that support adaptation strategy and national policy addressing specific needs for under the umbrella of Arctic change. One distinctive aspect of ArcticNet, then, it's also our approach bridging the scientific expertise and the indigenous knowledge. This is a key element over the last 20 years. Just to let you know, we're not managing any infrastructure. We're basically funding research that are going to use these infrastructure. So the one that Benoit has just mentioned, ONC, the one then Robert, yes, will talk about, and a few others, such as also the Canadian icebreaker Amundsen. So over the year, ArcticNet fund more than 230 interdisciplinary projects, participate in the training of more than 4,000, what we call in our jargon HQP, highly qualified personnel. We also work with a lot of government and department organizations at the federal and provincial and territories level, more than 140 institutions in Canada. I know that's a lot of number, but just to show you then, ArcticNet is really a pan-Arctic way to convene, to glue all the different organizations through time over the last 20 years. One thing also which is really important, we're working with 40 post-secondary institutions, universities and colleges, and through time, 25 different international or countries participate through ArcticNet at different programs. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Lennox. I'm the scientific director of Ocean Tracking Network, and I'm an associate professor at Dalhousie University. At Ocean Tracking Network, we help facilitate ocean observations at multiple different scales. It's very difficult to track animals underwater. We can't use GPS like you can on land. But it's really critical to understand how animals are distributed in the environment in order to support fisheries management, marine spatial planning, and a wide variety of different activities. And there's broad interest in understanding this animal movement from government applications as well as academia, but also indigenous communities to better understand how animal distributions are changing and how they respond to different environmental factors. So Ocean Tracking Network provides critical infrastructure to researchers and communities that want to understand how animals are moving. And the core of this infrastructure is the acoustic receiver. So we use a system that takes advantage of the ocean's soundscape. We can send signals from tagged animals to these receivers, and then these receivers can be downloaded, the data recovered, and they all go into the OTN data system, which now has over 2 billion detections of animal locations around the world. Ocean Tracking Network manages research infrastructures across Canada by deploying receivers in key locations and swimway corridors. But we also loan thousands of receivers to partners across Canada in Indigenous communities, in academia, in the government, and to non-governmental organizations that want to track animal movements to answer really specific questions. And we also loan the receivers around the world to support Canada's role in supporting marine conservation and environmental monitoring at a global scale. And again, that OTN data system archives all of those data and matches all the detections of the tagged animals. We also have a really unique fleet of gliders, which are autonomous vehicles. We have both wave gliders that travel on the surface and slocum gliders that dive from the surface to the bottom of the ocean collecting data. And we use those both to support our animal tracking initiatives, but also to collect oceanographic data that all go into openly accessible databases. More and more Ocean Tracking Network is shifting the focus and the support into the Arctic region. The movement of a lot of Arctic species and Atlantic species that are pushing into the Arctic are not always well resolved, and the ability to track them at the individual scale using the acoustic telemetry tools really opens up new avenues for management and for science that are exciting, but also valuable to communities. So in the coming years, we really foresee that with our funding from Canada Foundation for Innovation, the Ocean Tracking Network infrastructure is going to make an increasingly large impact on Arctic monitoring, management, and supporting communities and co-management of the resources within communities.
Thank you. That's impressive. So as we already kind of dive into setting the scene and what's the current situation in relation to national research infrastructures in the Canadian Arctic, but can you go a little bit further in explaining or just reflecting on how Canada's national research infrastructures are contributing to monitoring the changes that are happening in the Arctic? Open to the table.
Do you want to go ahead? Okay. So, as I mentioned in my introduction, OceanWorks Canada has observing assets also in the Arctic, mostly, of course, not in the Arctic, because it's easier elsewhere than in the Arctic, for sure. But we have already, since 2012, established an observatory in Cambridge Bay in Nunavut, and it's been essentially for us the demonstration that it was also possible to get and collect data from these difficult environments 24/7 by 365. At the same time also, this was the beginning of our Indigenous engagement program, where we basically build and do everything that we do to collect data with and co-designed with the local communities. We also have, as I mentioned, these citizen science programs where community members go from time to time in their front yard or front waters, as it were, and collect data that will be helpful to them to understand the changes that are occurring in their waters. And one of the things that I didn't mention is that OceanWorks Canada's product is not so much the activities that we do at sea, it's the data that are being produced from the observations that are taking place. And so I think from that particular perspective, there's of course already something that's happening, but there's a lot more to do because our observing capabilities still are very sparse geographically, and there's obviously more investment that need to be done to monitor an environment which is changing so fast at this stage and with so much impact and interest geopolitically, as we will talk about later, I'm sure.
Thank you.
If I may add, I think I just want to remind everyone that Canada got the longest coastline of the world. So through these different infrastructure, Benoit just mentioned Ocean Network Canada, but there's some other infrastructure. For example, terrestrial field station. So they are part of monitoring what's happening in the Arctic. Many of these areas are inaccessible. If I talk about using the Canadian icebreaker Amundsen for research, this is dedicated for research every summer, and through time, over more than 20 years now, the Amundsen is going in some area repeatedly. So some of these areas, I can just mention one, then you believe you're not affected, but you will be. It's between Greenland and the North Ellesmere Island. It's called the Nares Strait. Most of the people don't know where it is, but trust me, this area, it's the last ice area in Canada or even on the planet. Without these kind of infrastructure, such as the Amundsen, it's impossible to ever go and monitor. So that's the only way to know what's happening there, and eventually what's happening there, which is a lot of fresh water melting, I don't want to go into detail, will have profound impact on the South. So all these kind of infrastructure, terrestrial or even marine type of infrastructure, will help Canadians in general, not only what happened in the North, but what happened also in the South, to take the right decision and adapt correctly. So these kind of monitoring are key for our next step, so to better adapt, I will say.
Yeah, and I think in the context of Ocean Tracking Network, the way that we're able to work with communities and researchers to really support sustainability, long-term visions for monitoring in places that are really difficult to access, but also the agility and adaptability. We can bring these acoustic receivers and we can move the gliders to areas that are in need of data at very short time scales. So we can help support the communities, we can help support the government, as well as the researchers with the infrastructure that's needed in these areas that are really difficult to get to, with data series that are much longer than could really be established by individual researchers. So kind of nucleating the whole research around these infrastructures and having the training and capacity provided by the infrastructures, I've seen as a huge benefit to the community. And right now, Ocean Tracking Network is supporting several communities and several long-term projects, including some monitoring of cod and Arctic char in Nunatsiavut, as well as research on Arctic char in Cambridge Bay. And we can really see the long-term benefits of having this approach where we provide the infrastructure and then the data come back into the data system and then are available for the long term to support the monitoring.
Yeah, and I can add that, because of the scope of the issues, the pace of the issue, the landmass to cover, it's virtually impossible for any single stakeholder, including the federal department, to collect all the data that's required for decision making. So the networks are really fundamental for us to get the additional data and to serve as a vehicle for the collaboration among domestic stakeholder, but also international stakeholder, and really a vehicle to address the specific research question that the communities up north are putting forward. Think of the research infrastructure very broadly. It's not just the Coast Guard vessel or of course, but also it's all the terrestrial station that were mentioned, Eureka, the CHAR, the Arctic Research Station, that are fundamental to staging the work even on the marine side. And also all the infrastructure in terms of digital capacity, so the Inuvik satellite station and all the satellite mission that help us get information that stage. But the research infrastructure is really fundamental just to get the data we need for advancing the Northerners' interest in terms of science and technology, but also to be able to catalyze the collaboration within Canada and with international. It's the infrastructure that help us attract collaboration with the other researchers from other countries and so on.
Excellent. So building on that, and we're talking about working with regional governments and communities and being there, how are those research infrastructures supporting local economic development and capacity building as well at the local level?
Well, we can see it certainly in the regions where we're working, and especially with the work that we do related to fish movement. The Arctic fisheries are projected to be multi-billion-dollar industries in the coming years, and the ability to track and understand how these species are moving, how they're distributing, what the stock dynamics are going to be really critical to actually fulfilling the potential of those fisheries for these northern communities. There's no doubt that the sign of the times is really that the economic development of the Arctic is a huge priority, and understanding the environment and understanding the context in which we're working is critical. And there's really no better way to do that than to have these long-term infrastructures that are providing the support and capacity at multiple different scales, from the community to the broad context of the territory. And I can really see already the impact that the research infrastructures are having in this space, and how critical they're going to be in order to actually fulfill the potential of the economic development there.
What I could add in terms of the other question is that what we're trying to do is to involve the local communities, like I suggested, not only with the citizen science applications, but also with the help with the maintenance of our infrastructure. So that's both at the same time involving them from a sort of almost commercial perspective, but also at the same time there's a lot of training involved. And we have indeed associated with our citizen science program a training in the use and maintenance of scientific instrumentation, which of course is is a benefit eventually to the individuals in the communities. And as Philippe was mentioning before, it counts as training of highly qualified personnel as well.
I would say every type of these infrastructure needs some training. All of us, where is the infrastructure, you need some people to look after and manage these infrastructure. If you look at some of the new Arctic station in Qikiqtarjuaq, so there's people hired to manage the station. And also, once you have some scientists getting there from the south or even from the north, getting there, even international, so it's creating some job and I would say a roulement. So I don't know the word in English, sorry. But you have this people getting their rotation, having a sort of momentum in the village, and it's helping at every level at this stage. And you hire people to do also some of the monitoring, because a lot of research cannot be there all the time. So you hire people, and that's a real collaboration partnership in this case.
Thank you. So we know that work in the Arctic is complex and it requires collaboration. And we've been talking about collaboration here. But I would like to invite you all to reflect on what are the unique capabilities of those research infrastructures to bring to Arctic research what individual institutions or individual universities or individual agencies cannot do alone at the both regional level, community level, or a broader level. What makes those research infrastructures so important for collaboration and to bring those groups together?
So,
Go ahead.
so yeah, I think first and foremost, no single institution has the capacity to do that kind of work, especially in the Arctic. It goes far beyond individual capacity to invest in infrastructure and so on. And there's a lot of benefit of sharing that infrastructure across multiple research and science opportunities. I would add to that beyond just the physical infrastructure, being a network to engage with the communities and with the Damas is extremely valuable. The science and research in the Arctic, it's all about long-term engagement with communities, having them involved at all stages of research. And it's very difficult for individual organization to do that. Having a network brings that stability in the engagement and window to engage additional scientists. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really a way to facilitate the collaboration amongst even domestic stakeholders to fully use the infrastructure, but also international collaboration. There's a lot of interest in the Arctic of other countries. There's area of the Arctic, like the Central Arctic Ocean, that have dedicated the agreement to develop a research plan to support future economic development. We need infrastructure to bring everybody around the table and support Canada's leadership at those negotiation tables.
I would fully agree with your point, Bernard, that a long-term relationship established with the communities is very important. In addition to that, I think it's worth mentioning that these major research facilities also bring the expertise with the equipment, with the maintenance, with the operation of something that you want to be going on for a long time. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that's perhaps even more important is that these major research facilities will typically come with, as Robert was mentioning before, a strong data management expertise and, of course, a long-term commitment to maintaining and curating the data that's collected in using what is called the FAIR principles as well as the CARE principles of Indigenous data management.
If I may add, I don't want to repeat what my colleague just said with the northern communities and indigenous communities, but I think one thing we sometimes forget, all these infrastructure are also perfect scientific diplomacy platform, because we invite international people to come. And that's one way then to show the leadership of Canada and a part of our sovereignty in the Arctic. So if a ship from, I'm not going to say any country, but let's say one another country got a full-time dedicated icebreaker and they come here every year, that's not showing our sovereignty and our leadership. So this is where these platforms are the perfect tool for science diplomacy at the same time, because you mentioned you have international receiver, ONC have their data, etc. So this is a platform there. We have a synergy, not only across research and Canadian, but also we are leader at the international level.
Thank you.
So many good points. I think the only thing that I can add to all those very good points is that the way I see it is really the way that these research infrastructures can contribute to connectivity at different scales. So research infrastructures have the capacity to connect different communities, different parts of the Arctic, and really dovetailing with what others have said, also connecting the Canadian Arctic through diplomacy to other regions of the Arctic. So more so than individuals can ever accomplish, the research infrastructures provide that connectivity and the capacity to really build something much larger that has greater impact. And again, using OTN as an example, coincidentally, the way that we're able to work with different communities to deploy receivers in different regions, and the animals that are tagged are moving between those different regions, and the data are able to be picked up and move into the data system, and everybody has access to all of those data. We can really see that at that broad regional Arctic scale, we have the ability to make much larger, broader connections that add a tremendous amount of value overall.
So since we're talking about co-development and working with indigenous communities and governments in the Arctic, how can we ensure that those relationships are meaningful and that we have meaningful engagement and co-leadership with Arctic indigenous communities in research and monitoring programs? How can we ensure that this is done in a meaningful way? Open.
Go ahead. I was just going to repeat what I said earlier, is that the data that's collected in these regions should indeed respect the wishes of the communities in terms of how their data should be shared, how openly it should be shared, how much should it be protected, and so on. Bernard, please go ahead.
Yeah, and just to put this question in context, the Inuit communities in particular have incredible interest in science and research, not just to witness it, but being part of it. Their interest in co-development of the research, contributing to asking the right question, and interest in building capacity. So the network, as we discussed, has a huge key role in that. And it is really co-development. There's many ways we can contribute to meaningful engagement, full recognition, use of Inuit indigenous knowledge in terms of developing the research question and the monitoring plan, use of indigenous language, respect at large in terms of engagement, data sovereignty, their own economic interests, and also being there for the long term. Again, same thing. There's no such thing as just going in the Arctic for a season or two and write a thesis and so on. It's a long-term relationship, long-term investment that needs to build from infrastructure that support those types of long-term engagement.
If I may just add also, it's totally what you just said, but you also need to engage them at time zero, not at time one. So straight at the beginning, don't come with a plan already. So just start and build together. That's the only way to respect and do it in the right way, and that will be more efficient, and also the greater will be way greater at the end than just having your idea, bring and try to fit that. So just start from scratch.
You're answering my next question, which it is, who sets the priority? Where those questions are coming from? Are they coming from those communities, from the regional level, or is an interest in that emerges at some lab somewhere? Or what is the order, if there is one, or it's all done organically? Who starts this conversation? Who sets not the agenda, but who sets the priority of this is where we should focus on that area, not this other area?
Well, one thing that I think that we are aiming for with Ocean Tracking Network, making the infrastructure available, is that the research can actually be completely led and executed in communities by community members. And in Atlantic Canada and in the Arctic, we loan equipment to communities so that they can deploy and maintain all of the equipment independently, and it provides the capacity to actually conduct this research independently at a lot of times. And of course, it facilitates and fosters collaboration. But the nature of the research infrastructure, the ability to provide access and make this equipment available, really breaks down some of the barriers to conducting research, which would traditionally exist, because the availability and the accessibility of the actual equipment create such a barrier. So when you're able to actually have access to that, and you're able to have access to the training through the network, then you can start to have more independence and less reliance, and it really fosters Indigenous and Inuit leadership in these spaces as well.
Yeah, and it has to be a shared decision making with the communities. We have the benefit in several areas. There's official agreement. There's official co-management board for fisheries, for marine protected area where that official partnership is recognized. There's committees to go to in terms of seeking inputs for the development of research and so on. And in the Arctic, in the Inuit communities are well organized, keenly interested. So yeah, the discussions start really with them. And in terms of priorities, the benefit of the large research infrastructure is that it can address priorities from different stakeholders. Speaking just for the federal departments, there's a lot of questions that are of interest of several departments, like environmental oceanography, atmospheric monitoring, so it's environment, it's fisheries, it's D&D, and there's a lot of scientific value, there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of capacity to respond to the community's research question through research network, because it's address question a broad specific mandate of the individual partners, like the federal mandates.
Can I add just on what you just said about, and I think you have probably in mind the CSAS. I never remember the complete acronym, but the Canadian Scientific Secretariat for Advisory.
Yeah.
Whatever, it's a CSAS. I know the acronym only. But here it's really to bring forward the Inuit priorities, federal department priorities, all together through a consensus. This is a key point, and using after some infrastructure, such as the icebreaker Amundsen, now you can go every year and monitor one specific area. In this case was the Pikala-Sorsuaq, the now Polinia between Greenland and Canada. It's also international. So you fulfill all these little priorities from different departments and also the Indigenous group all together through one infrastructure, or many in this case.
Yeah, if I may add, that's a good example of all the value of the research network is the Canadian Science Advice Secretariat. It's a formal process that Fisheries and Ocean use to bring knowledge holders, including Inuit knowledge holders, but also academia, federal scientists, around a transparent, independent process to address specific science advice need. And they benefit from network investment by gathering all the data, the information that has been accumulated through years over periods of times or facilities that's not in the reach of DFO alone. And it takes in account the data, the knowledge, and provides a science advice. For example, what are the key biological areas that should be considered for protection for a marine area? We go through that process of gathering expertise, data that has been collected through the previous investment in large infrastructure and research.
I don't want to sound pessimistic. This all sounds really great, but I imagine that there are some challenges along the way too, and working collaboration of different federal departments and communities and regional governments and all that. Can you reflect a little bit on the challenges and how to overcome those challenges? I'm going off script now.
It's totally fine. I think there's, yes, there are challenges, and there are related to, well, backtrack one step. So as Bernard was suggesting, there's a lot that research infrastructure can contribute to the priorities of a number of federal government departments, such as transport, D&D, DFO, of course. But one of the issues is the fact that we cannot observe at the same time everywhere in the Arctic. Like I said, this is a big space, the longest coast in the world, as Philippe was mentioning before, and there's a lot of space there. There's lots of marine protected areas that should be monitored, and we cannot be there all at the same time, particularly not in the winter, because the Amundsen, being an icebreaker, it still cannot go there in the winter. So this is the big challenge. How can we be omnipresent, be there all the time, 365 days a year, and cover as much of the geographical area as we can? We can do some things. We can help with transport and the safety of navigation by providing some data on the changing Arctic, on the disappearance of ice. There's satellite data that can be used as well for that purpose, but it's, again, very limited.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think we need a little bit more of coordination. So I think we're really good. We just mentioned the longest coastline. We cannot be everywhere at the same time and all year round. So we need to coordinate with people living in the north, among us, and among the different infrastructure. Why not using one infrastructure who help the second one, and etc. And that would be one way to be more efficient, to be more present in the Arctic, and again, to show our leadership. And I feel presently that sometimes we're really good as scientists, where we got in Canada some of the top scientists, the top community, I will say, who want to work with the scientists. But what we're lacking, everyone in French will say, you get the blanket on your side because we want to position ourselves. I think it's time that we try to, instead of taking the blanket, to put it bigger so we don't need to get it on our side and really be more a community, all together, a synergy, a glue among ourselves. I think it's time to show leadership in this area, and that will help also our sovereignty, that we're not fighting among each other, but we're all in the same place at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just the scope of investment that's required to cover that large area, the scope of interest from the community in terms of economic agenda, that's massive. And for any one of our organization, if you compare the level of effort or coverage in the southern area versus the Arctic, you'll quickly see that there's a huge gap in infrastructure in the Arctic. So every opportunities to invest, to collaborate, make more of those investments is critical. And the other challenge I would add is the Arctic is changing so fast because of the climate change and the economic agenda. So there's no such thing as a baseline in the Arctic. It's shifting. So we cannot just cover one region of the Arctic and presume we're good for the future years. We have to have a research and monitoring infrastructure that's able to characterize informed decision related to the various ways climate impact the Arctic. Obviously, the sea ice melting that has massive implication, but ocean acidification, the circulation of current, the exchange with the Pacific and the Atlantic, all that requires massive effort in terms of following the change and the data to be able to model that and support an informed decision.
And because of the speed of change that you just mentioned, Bernard, there's an urgency into getting more means and resources to implement this particular observation improvement.
Yeah, and when you talk about all these challenges, I think it really actually emphasizes the opportunities that exist. And you think about how would you do this without really strong and robust research infrastructures in Canada? Like it really would be a massive challenge when you look at the Pan-Arctic context, working with communities and the platform that an organization like ArcticNet provides for researchers, communities, research infrastructures to come together and actually discuss how are we going to use our resources collectively, collaboration with DFO and with co-management boards like Torngat Secretariat, the actual ability to come together and have these discussions and figure out, okay, we all have all these resources and different interests and different mandates, but there's so much overlap, and how can we use those resources together collectively to form like the strongest nucleus around resolving these problems efficiently and also rapidly, given the level of urgency. And the research infrastructures, I mean, certainly ONC and OTN, I mean, we are really focused on helping support addressing these challenges along with the different organizations and stakeholders and rights holders in the Arctic. And when I look in the next 5 and 10 years, I really see how our collective infrastructures and communities are going to be able to have an impact in this space.
Before we look ahead into the future, let's talk about and zoom out from the regional level and think more internationally now. We know that there's growing and intensified geopolitical interest in the Arctic. So, and with this growing international interest in the region, how can Canada use science and technology to reinforce Arctic sovereignty?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that when I speak about Ocean Wars Canada in particular, the Canada Foundation for Innovation that funds us has requested to the major research facilities that they come with a 15-year plan. Because the Arctic observation for Ocean Wars Canada is one of our strategic priorities, we obviously articulated our 15-year plan scenarios around the Arctic. And what we want to do in this context, and I'll just be very brief here, is that we want to increase coastal observing, obviously with all the Inuit communities around the coast there, but also we want to also suggest a major facility that will observe continuously, 365 days a year, in real time, the seabed and the ocean, Arctic Ocean, along the limit of the Canadian exclusive economic zone, and including also the marine protected areas that are around there. So it's a system that would be multi-use and therefore support a number of government departments, including, of course, DFO, but also ECCC, Transport, and DND. And I'm not going to say more here, but if you want to come to our booth later during this session, I'd be happy to describe some more about it.
Yeah, Benoit, of course, hit the nail on the head with the multi-use and dual use. We're fostering an immense number of deployments across the Arctic with different infrastructures, with ONC, with the Amundsen, the icebreaker that's making trips, and with OTN, where we're sending glider missions and we're deploying acoustic receivers around the Arctic. And we want to explore ways that every time that we're going out and making a deployment and working the Arctic, working in different communities, in that pan-Arctic context, that we're deploying as much as we can, and we're putting out sensors that are going to collect the optimal amount of data, and more it's becoming clear that those data are going to, we want to be able to include new sensors and new capabilities that are going to facilitate Canadian sovereignty and defense applications. And we're fortunate that we have this infrastructure that is really widely distributed and agile. We can move it around, we can outfit it with different sensors, and we need to make sure that we're plugged into the different agencies, and not only defense, but I mean, in the cross-government context, you know, how can we optimize the resources that we have for making these deployments? And then it's been mentioned before as well, but certainly the way that infrastructures and science can really reinforce diplomacy in a pan-Arctic context. We work with a lot of different partners throughout the Arctic and with allies in Scandinavia, and it creates a really strong opportunity as well, especially because we're using Canadian technology largely to be sending that technology around the world and supporting Canadian industries, and building a network of monitoring capacity that then all comes back into the database, the data system that archives and allows us to share and work together to solve some of these major challenges that are really grand scale.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think with any type of infrastructure, we need to be sure that they are dedicated and we have the full funding. But presently, most of our national infrastructure, we need to renew them every 5 years. So that's mean 2 years in advance, you start to think, build your proposal and try to get renewed. where you look at some other country, and I can give an example for an icebreaker. Germany got their full-time, their icebreaker. They are not even an Arctic country, but they have their plan 5 years in advance. Everything is fully funded. They don't need to search. They are already in coordination and the other step. Where in Canada, what we're doing, and I think this is where we need to think as Canadian, what do we want? Do we want these infrastructure to be full-time? Has Canada one of the major assets, a major structure that we can have and take the right decision for Canadian? I will say put our sovereignty and also our leadership. That's probably the only way to be sure. And it's not every 5 years, all these researchers do again and again and again every 5 years. That's what happened with the Amundsen since, 20 years, where Germany is just planning. In our case, we're doing both, but it takes time. So we need something dedicated of all these infrastructure, and we want to stay ahead and be a leader in Arctic.
Yeah, there's the scientific leadership on its own that's really important because a lot of the issues in the Arctic that we study are of global significance, whatever it's the ocean impact of climate change on the ocean and their capacity to mitigate some of the emission. If you think about the global climate, weather, contaminants, that's all work that has global implication where we have an opportunity to lead. And practically speaking, the investment in the long-term research infrastructure and research that enables Inuit community and the government of Canada to effectively represent Canada in international organization, to put up forward and to good footing to negotiate the science priority, to negotiate access to resources that include the regional marine fisheries organization. I mentioned the Central Arctic Ocean, but there's others where there's a direct link where the information we gather through the research, we bring Inuit representative in the international scientific fora to support Canada position. There's also similar work on the Arctic Council and in many scientific global scientific marine science organization where basically the position of Canada, the negotiation of Canada is directly supported by those investment in science.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we love the Major Research Facility program, right, Benoit?
I do.
So we do have only a couple of minutes left. And I know we're going to have time for questions at the end. So I have one final question. And I know we are already talking about the future here. But if you have to list one or two priorities for the next 10 years, what would that priority be for Canada in terms of where research should go for the next 10 years?
Well, first of all, research has to go somewhere because it's with the Arctic is use it or lose it, right?
Yeah.
It's been said before for many years, and it continues to be true. In fact, it's truer every day, I'm afraid, with the incursion of foreign vessels in the Arctic that are doing research, supposedly. But what we need, of course, is a plan, and I think these plans exist. We need collaboration among research infrastructures, as you suggested, and I would say that, in fact, we do host some of the OTN receivers on OceanWise Canada already, so that's happening to some extent, and we can do more. And of course, engaging continuously with the local communities will, of course, help with getting us where we want to be eventually.
Thank you.
Also, we need to be more cohesive in Canada, a little bit more in synergy, all of us. We're a large country, we're not that many people when you compare some other country, even with the funding. So the only way to stay ahead is to, by collaboration through the Indigenous group, and we're in Canada, through the different organization, from academy, from the different department, different organization. And this is the difficult part. As every family, there will be some bump, but that's the only way to get all together. It's to figure out a way to have an organization, a central way to bring everyone together through time and be sure that in 10 years, where all our ducks are well aligned and in a respectful way.
Thank you. So I think collaboration is the word of the day today. So thank you, our panelists, and thank you all for joining us a little bit earlier today. Thank you.